Have you ever noticed whenever a woman or girl younger than you passes nearby, your eyes automatically stuck at her? For a glance in less than a second. If I ask you why, you probably couldn't tell. Maybe you'll say she looked beautiful. But is this really true? Because long before the conscious mind starts explaining attraction, another part of the brain has already begun making predictions. Ancient and fast predictions. Predictions shaped by millions of years of evolution. Today, we're looking at that oldest pieces of software still running inside the human mind, which makes us to attract to girls younger than us. In 1972, evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers published what would become one of the most influential and controversial papers in behavioral science, Parental Investment Theory. The argument was deceptively simple. In species where reproduction costs one sex more than the other, the higher investing sex tends to become more selective, while the lower investing sex tends to compete more intensely for access to mates. For humans, the biological investment gap is substantial. A woman's reproductive window is finite and declines more rapidly with age, while male reproductive capacity typically remains possible much later into life. From this observation emerged an evolutionary prediction. Certain traits associated with reproductive potential would become especially important in human attraction. And among the most visible of those traits is youth. Not because youth guarantees fertility or every young person is fertile, but because throughout most of human evolutionary history, youth was often correlated with reproductive potential. Over thousands of generations, researchers argue the human brain became increasingly sensitive to those signals. The brain doesn't consciously calculate fertility, it reads patterns, visual patterns, pre-verbal patterns, the kind of information that gets processed before language ever arrives. Skin texture, facial structure, eye clarity, hair quality, body proportions. These characteristics can carry information about age, health, and hormonal development. Research suggests people often respond to such cues automatically, long before conscious reasoning becomes involved. Consider skin. Collagen and elasticity tend to decline with age. Most people aren't consciously thinking about collagen, yet the visual system still responds to the patterns that aging creates. The same principle appears in studies of waist-to-hip ratio. Across many cultures, researchers have found recurring preferences for certain body proportions associated with reproductive health, although the exact ideal varies between populations and environments. By the way, you can watch this video, link is in description. Now come to facial symmetry. It also shows a similar pattern, not because symmetry equals perfection, but because it can function as one of many indicators of developmental stability and health. The important point is this: the conscious mind often arrives late to the process. Initial attraction frequently begins before deliberate reflection has a chance to weigh in. The feeling comes first, the explanation comes later. The obvious objection is culture. Maybe this is advertising, movies, or social conditioning. Researchers also asked the same question. So in 1989, psychologist David Buss conducted one of the largest cross-cultural studies of human mate preferences ever performed. 37 cultures, more than 10,000 participants, 6 continents, different religions, economic systems, and different social structures. The result was striking. In every culture studied, men on average preferred younger partners than women did. The magnitude varied, the details varied, but the direction of the pattern remained remarkably consistent. That doesn't prove culture plays no role. Far from it. Human behavior is almost always shaped by both biology and culture. But the consistency of the findings led many researchers to conclude that evolved psychological mechanisms are likely part of the story. Not the entire story, but a significant part of it. But here's the part that rarely makes it into the conversation. A person can become wiser, kinder, more emotionally intelligent, resilient, and self-aware, more capable of sustaining a meaningful relationship, and none of those qualities are immediately visible from across a room. Evolution didn't optimize for wisdom, it optimized for reproduction. Those are not the same thing. The instincts that helped our ancestors reproduce are not necessarily the instincts that help modern people build fulfilling relationships. Depth takes time to discover. Character takes time to reveal. Trust takes time to earn. And yet the brain continues to make snap judgments based on information it can gather in seconds. That tension between instinct and understanding sits quietly underneath countless human relationships. Knowing this doesn't erase the instinct, the circuitry and patterns remain, but awareness changes your relationship with it. You stop mistaking an impulse for an identity. You stop assuming that what captures attention is the same thing that deserves commitment. Evolution helped write the first draft of attraction. Character, judgment, and experience are what edit it. And sometimes the most important decision a person makes isn't who they notice first, it's who they choose after the instinct has spoken. Till then, be happy and subscribe to Darker Rose. Bye-bye.